The traitor Astartes manipulate the skeins of fate to further their own ambitions. Driven to rend the galaxy in twain for their own selfish desires for power, their lies, ploys and deceptions weave a tapestry of corruption capable of sundering empires. Yet amongst all, those who worship the changer of ways of the ruinous pantheon are by far the most cunning of all the spawns of chaos. For today, we shall elucidate the warbands of chaos devoted to the Lord of Change. The pawns of the great conspirator, the Thrallbands of Tzeentch.
The warriors of the Corpse God believe themselves to be strong, but we have seen a greater truth. Their empire is built upon sinking sand, and they themselves are naught but clay. By Tzeentch's will, we have been shown power to mold their weak minds and bodies to our own liking. The Legiones Astartes would bear unique burdens for the gifts they would inherit from their gene-sires. Empowered beyond the comprehension of mortal men, each legion would cultivate a speciality for warfare and philosophical foundations befitting their power. Yet among all the Space Marine legions, there exists one above all, whose fall from grace would be heralded by their insatiable hunger for knowledge and mastery of the ethereal. The Magisters of Prospero, the Thousand Sons. Founded during the Wars of Unification, the Legiones Astartes would encompass a fragment of their Gene-Father's might, who in turn would contain a fragment of the Master of Mankind's godlike traits. The most powerful Psyker to ever grace the stars, the Emperor would create a son molded in his image of warp mastery. From his creation's genetic materials, a new breed of warriors would be born, gifted as the most powerful Psykers among the Space Marine legions. The 15th Legion would be drawn from the most psychically gifted neophytes of the Achaemenid Empire of Holy Terror. 1,000 Astartes would undergo the surgeries within the gene labs of the moon of Luna as warp storms waged across the Sol system. Creating psychic convergences across Terra and its orbiting moon, psychotic outbursts would spontaneously break out across the throne world, to which the psychic-spawned madness would prove to be an ill omen for the 15th. With the Legion's inaugural aspirants now raised to the stature of the Astartes, the Emperor would test his promising new legion by deploying them to bring compliance to the remaining techno-barbarian hordes of Terra. Victorious of their first campaign in the name of the burgeoning Imperium, the Emperor would personally name the Legion as the Thousand Sons and gift unto them an expeditionary fleet for assimilation into the Great Crusade across the stars. For while the Thousand Sons had proven their worth in battle, it would not be long until their reunion with their Primarch. Preceded by only Horus Lupercal and Leman Russ in his reunion with the Master of Mankind, the Crimson King of Prospero would study the Immaterium to better the lot of his homeworld. Emancipating the civilization from the tyranny of warp-spawned creatures that once roamed Prospero's desolate cities, Magnus the Red would bring order, prosperity, and peace to his people. Prospero's capital, Tizca, would be known as the City of Light, as its white marble metropolis housed bountiful tomes of Arcanum, read by a populace poised to understand the intricacies of the universe. Obelisks of glass towered over the self-sufficient paradise, made real by its benevolent ruler, as the Crimson King busied himself with endless journeys into the so-called Great Ocean of the Immaterium. Foreseeing the arrival of the Emperor to Prospero, Magnus would grow to adulthood before his Gene-Father's reunion. Having communicated for years through means of the warp, the Master of Mankind would arrive upon the utopian City of Light and induct his long-lost progeny into the Imperium. Given command of the 15th Legion, Magnus would look upon his gene sons with pride as they demonstrated their affinity for sorcery and psychic abilities. The Thousand Sons had waged war for 5 Terran Standard years, and through their use of the Immaterium, sought to emulate a fraction of the Emperor's power. Though wary of psychic abilities, the Master of Mankind had allowed the 15th Legion to hone their sorceries as a means to bring swift compliance to the galaxy, much to the chagrin of his stalwart gene-son, Leman Russ of the 6th Legion. Proclaimed as cowards by the Wolf King, the 15th Legion had been met with scrutiny and distrust by the wider Imperium. Yet with their Primarch now installed as the Master of the Thousand Sons, a glorious future would be promised for their Legion. Yet fate would not be so kind to the Sons of Magnus, for only suffering would be destined for the acolytes of the Immaterium. The lack of restraint demonstrated by the Thousand Sons would bear a fatal cost. Throughout the ranks of the 15th, a warp-born mutation would ravage their numbers, as the so-called Flesh Change would transform its Astartes into feral spawns of chaos. Interred within stasis pods, in hopes of administering a future cure to their affliction, Magnus the Red would toil for years in hopes of saving his gene-sons from their degenerative affliction. Already at a pandemic scale during their reunion with their Primarch, the Crimson King would watch in horror as the Flesh Change spiraled into greater numbers with the departure of the Emperor from Prospero. Obtaining a means to stall the Flesh Change from spreading further, Magnus would consort with duplicitous entities within the Great Ocean. Naive in his assumption that his Legion's curse had been absolved, Magnus would resume command of the remaining 1,000 Astartes, left untouched by the mutations of the warp. Once more literal in their reflection of their Legion's namesake, the Thousand Sons would seek to draw new recruits to bolster their numbers as they ventured forth to rejoin the Great Crusade. With the Crimson King in command, the 15th Legion would bring untold worlds into compliance through means of diplomacy, trickery, and psychic manipulation. As more sons of the Emperor would be brought into the fold of the Imperium, dissent would grow among the Primarchs as they observed the methods of the Red Cyclops. Scavenging knowledge from their sundered foes, the Thousand Sons' unquenchable thirst for knowledge would rouse further suspicion from their rival legions. Cooperating with the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, during the Arc Reach cluster campaign, Magnus would despise the route's use of violence and destruction inflicted upon the Avanian populace of Heliosa. Blood would be spilt as the Space Wolves and Thousand Sons would clash as the 15th Legion slew several Fenrisian wolves and incapacitated members of the Vilca Fenrica with psychic manipulation. Hasta of the Pavoni cult would submit to the Flesh Change during battle and cause several more mutations within the Legion. Leman Russ would intervene, slaying Hastur with a blast of his bolt gun, and would seemingly commit his wolves to battle the Thousand Sons. With the intervention of the Primarch of the 17th Legion, Lorgar Aurelian, further casualties would be prevented. Yet the Wolf King would never forget his brother's flagrant abuse of his powers, and would swear a blood oath against the Crimson King, promising that one day he would enact a reckoning upon the Thousand Sons. Rumors would spread of the corruptions of the 15th Legion across the Imperium in the wake of the Battle of Heliosa. Giving credence to the misgivings of Primarchs Rogel Dawn, Mortarion, and Corvus Corax in their mistrust of Psykers within the legions, a call for censure would reach the Emperor. The most fervent detractors of the Thousand Sons would demand the Legion's expulsion from Imperial history, alike to the 2nd and 11th Legions, yet the Master of Mankind would defer to a council to decide the fate of the Psykers of the Legiones Astartes. Convening the Council of Nicaea, the Emperor would invite representatives of each legion with a vested interest in the outcome to state their case in his presence. Magnus the Red would champion his legion's use of the warp, stating its effectiveness in bringing compliance to the stars and future deeds their potential could fulfill. The Primarch of the Death Guard, Mortarion, a survivor of an upbringing subsumed in the abusive excesses of the arcane, would oppose the Crimson King. Librarian representatives of the White Scars and Space Wolves, Targatai Usugai and Ophir Weirdmake, would fight for their respective allegiances, yet the Emperor's decision would be final. Wary of the unfettered abuse inherent in the manipulations of the warp, the Master of Mankind would draft the Decree of Nicaea and outlaw all use of psychers within the Legiones Astartes henceforth. Sanctioned psychers, such as astropaths and navigators, would be exempt from the decree, yet the Librarius of the Space Marines would be disbanded. Magnus would return to his homeworld, enraged at the misfortune of his legion. Their quest for knowledge had cost them dearly, yet they had always been loyal to the cause of the Emperor and never strayed from his commands. Yet the woes of the sons of Magnus would only begin with the dawn of the dark days of the Horus Heresy. Horus Lupercal, War Master of the Imperium, would be wounded on the planet of Darwin. Ensnared by the malevolent ruinous powers of the warp, Horus would languish within the tides of the great ocean. Observing the plight of his brother, Magnus would intervene within the Immaterium and attempt to steer the War Master from the path to damnation. Heedless of his counsel, Horus would learn of the dystopian future of humanity, wherein the Emperor would be praised as a living deity. Rejecting the imperial truth and assuming the mantle of champion of the ruinous powers, Horus would take his first steps towards his final battle to destroy the Emperor. Magnus would reel from the intervention, desperate to warn the Master of Mankind of the impending betrayal of the Lupercal. Projecting his psychic form to the Imperial Palace, the Crimson King would breach the protective wards of the Emperor's Webway project in order to contact his father. Ruining all hope of humanity's use of the ancient Webway for their own means, Magnus would damn the Imperium to forever voyage across the stars within the malevolent tides of the warp. Furious at his son's heinous actions, the Emperor would dispatch Leman Russ and his Space Wolves to bring the Thousand Sons to Terra for judgment. Assembling a force of custodians and Sisters of Silence to facilitate their mission, the Wolf King would revel for the chance to fulfill his blood oath. Yet en route to Prospero, Horus Lupercal would intercept the Emperor's orders and make changes to their intent. The Wolf King would be ignorant of his War Master's betrayal of the Imperium and accept his new orders without objection. The Rout were no longer tasked with the arrest of the Crimson King, their orders now demanding that the Thousand Sons were to be exterminated. Magnus the Red would foresee the impending doom of Prospero, yet take no action to prevent its passing. The Crimson King now understood his naive manipulations by the Changer of Ways, Tzeentch, and would not allow his legion to become the tools of chaos. Seeking repentance for his actions, Magnus would hide the arrival of the 6th Legion fleet and watch Prospero burn as the Vilca Fenrica razed its marble pyramids and ornate structures to the ground. His people would be slaughtered as the Thousand Sons fought a desperate battle of survival without the aid of their Primarch. Overwhelmed, the first captain of the 15th Legion, Arzek Araman, would beseech his Primarch to intervene. Reluctantly, the Crimson King would join the battle as the Thousand Sons fell back to the final bastion of their once proud City of Light. Leman Russ would confront Magnus and charge into a bloody and infamous duel. The Wolf King's armor would be inscribed with wards against psychic powers, leading to a battle of blades and fists between the Primarchs. As the superior brawler and executioner of the Emperor, Leman Russ would best Magnus in combat and break his spine across his knee. Broken in physical form, Magnus would call upon the powers of the warp for salvation. Surrendering to the rule of Tzeentch, Magnus would be empowered by the Changer of Ways and transform into a demon prince of chaos. Teleporting the remnants of Tisca unto a demon world, the Thousand Sons would establish their new home of the planet of sorcerers within the Eye of Terror. The Sundered King of Prospero would be shattered into shards of his former might, to which his loyal sons would gather his remnant power to reinstate their lord. Yet one final piece of the Crimson King remained prior to the final battle for humanity's soul, a shard which Magnus would attempt to retrieve from the Throne World during the Siege of Terra. The Thousand Sons' numbers would be greatly diminished to approximately 9,000 Astartes during the opening salvos of the Siege of Terra. Acting as support contingents to their larger and more direct Traitor Legion brethren, Magnus would orchestrate arcane stratagems to coincide with the deployments of the Lord of Iron, Perturabo. Scheming behind the backs of his Primarch brothers, Magnus would use them as a means to an end in obtaining the final shard of his being. For should he achieve his objective, Magnus would plot to slay the War Master following his duel with the Emperor and assume the mantle of Master of Mankind in his place. Yet such ambitions would be thwarted with the Crimson King's infiltration of the Imperial Palace. Confronted by Malcador the Sigillite, Magnus would learn that the final fragment of his being had been claimed by his loyalist son, Revuel Arvida, now reborn as the being known as Janus. Incapacitating Malcador, Magnus would confront the Emperor upon the Golden Throne, only to be halted by the perpetual Primarch of the Salamanders, Vulcan. Banished from the material realm by the relentless tenacity of the Lord of Drakes, Magnus would submit the last shred of his material body to assume the form of a true immaterial demon. The War Master's rebellion would fail, and with the death of Horus Lupercal, the Thousand Sons and their traitor brethren would retreat to the Eye of Terror. As punishment for their failure, the Thousand Sons would once more be tormented by the flesh change through the influence of the Changer of Ways. Yet Chief Librarian Arzek Ahriman would attempt to abolish their curse once and for all. Casting the so-called Rubric of Ahriman, the Thousand Sons would be saved from their curse, yet pay a terrible price. The least psychically gifted sons of Magnus would be disintegrated from the vast tendrils of lightning that spewed forth from the rubric, their bodies turned to ash inside their ceramite. Yet the armor of these unfortunate Astartes would not collapse, for the inert souls of the dead would allow the spectral Astartes to continue to serve their legion. The rubric Marines would serve their now further empowered masters as mindless automatons, much to the horror of the Crimson King. Magnus would attempt to slay Ahriman, and would succeed, if not for the intervention of Tzeentch. The Cabal of Ahriman would be banished from the Thousand Sons, with their leader tasked with a great quest to uncover the true meaning of chaos. Fractured into several warbands of contrasting allegiances, the 15th Legion now stalks the stars, in search of the mysteries and artifacts of the Immaterium. Invading the Eldar's Black Library and other repositories of knowledge for powerful spells and arcanum, the Thousand Sons now serve the whims of their curiosity, unfettered by Imperial oversight. Recruitment into the 15th Legion has always been a difficult task. Accepting only the most prodigious and promising psychers into their aspirants' ranks, the Thousand Sons' continual harrying of the flesh change would see constant need to replenish their number. By far the most susceptible to mutations of all the Astartes legions, the gene seed of the Thousand Sons would prove to be both a blessing and a curse. Further exacerbated by their allegiance to the Changer of Ways, there are few Astartes within the Legion who retain the gene seed of their Primarch due to the annihilation of swathes of their number by the Rubric of Ahriman. It is a source of immense pride within the Legion to have survived the countless abominable mutations and toils of battle unscathed, for the majority of the 15th now march into battle as soulless spectres of their former glory. Once drawing recruits from their homeworld of Prospero, with its destruction, the Thousand Sons seem incapable of replenishing their numbers through traditional means. Reports suggest that through fell rituals, The 15th Legion would resurrect their fallen battle brothers to inhabit living hosts. Damned to never reach their former might of the days of the Great Crusade, the Thousand Sons number in the mere thousands to this day, with only a select few retaining bodies of flesh and blood. Bearing the colours of the immortal regiments of Old Earth's Achaemenid Empire during the Wars of Unification, the 15th Legion would pride their Terran heritage. Their pauldrons bearing the coloration of the Achaemenid Empire and Nohian witchmark of Old Terra, centered with the symbol M. The Romani numeral of 1000 symbolizes their legion's chosen Astartes, handpicked by the Emperor. Supplanted with their reunion of their Primarch, the Thousand Sons would coat their armor with crimson, alike to their liege. Changing their legion iconography with their relocation to Prospero, the 15th Legion would adopt a solar glyph in honor of their expanse into the stars. Bearing their loyalty to their Genefather with immense pride, the Thousand Sons would regardless once more renew their iconography with their ruinous descent into chaos. Adopting the blue and yellow livery in deference to their patron god, Tzeentch, their once disciplined uniform, ranking strictures, and conventions would be abandoned. Bearing the designs of their heraldry with elements of golden trim and azure blue, each warband of the 15th Legion would bear personal heraldry whilst maintaining uniformity to the colours of the Lord of Change. Bearing crowns and ornate crests upon their ceramite, alike to the pharaohs of ancient Earth, such ornamentation marks the Astartes of the Thousand Sons, not claimed by the rubric of Ahriman. Now bearing the symbol of Ouroboros upon their left pauldron, the Thousand Sons' depiction of the serpent, wreathed in flame, eating its own tail, espouses the fallen legion's adherence to the eternal cyclical nature of change and renewal. Their right pauldron displays their membership to the numerous sects of the Legion, whether they bear resemblance to the Changer of Ways, Magnus's Cyclopean visage, or the forgotten legacies of Prosperine culture. Utilizing runes of varying combinations to identify their membership of the disparate warbands of the 15th, the framing of their heraldry also identifies which squad each member of the Thousand Sons inhabits. Inscribed with magically potent inks crafted from rare materials, Astartes of the 15th also employ tabards of varying colours to denote their thrall band or squad. Though only the most devoted scholars of Tzeentch can truly comprehend the meaning of the enchanted markings of chaos. Prior to their reunion with their Primarch, the Thousand Sons would organize their legion in similar manner to their Legiones Astartes counterparts. With Magnus installed as their leader, the Crimson King would organize fellowships of 1,000 Astartes into the legion, with 10 fellowships being active during their peak numerical strength of approximately 10,000 Astartes. With the catastrophic losses of the Kamenka Troika campaign, an entire fellowship would be lost, resulting in 9 fellowships to become the standard, known as the Pesajet. The commanders of the legion would form the Rahati, or Coven of Magnus, and captains of each fellowship would pilgrimage to their cousin legions to broaden their understanding of their brethren's favoured tactics and compliances. With revered captains such as Phocis Dakar seconded to the Lunar Wolves, the Thousand Sons would promote bonds of interlegion cooperation above and beyond their peers. With select individuals such as Hathor Mart rewarded an oath of moment from the Primarch of the 3rd Legion, Fulgrim, during his cooperation with the Emperor's Children Legion. Highly independent due to their nature as a small legion, the most psychically gifted individuals would be installed to lead each squad as thrall wizards. Commanding Imperial Army regiments to bolster their numbers, the Thousand Sons would employ many specialized human regiments such as the Prosperine Guard, Prosperine Spire Guard, Zau Arkad Tugmata, Skyguard Air Command, Palatine Guards, and personal Titan Legion, the Legio Zestobiacs. Forming specialized organizations within the 15th Legion, Magnus would champion elite cadres to enhance the effectiveness of his legion's psychic prowess. The Rahati, the inner coven of the Legion would encompass the greatest sorcerers of the Legion. Similar to the position of Mournival within the Lunar Wolves Legion, the Rahati would be guarded by the elite Scarab Occult Terminators, known as the Sekhmet. Veterans of countless wars, Magnus's First Company veterans would fight not only with immense psychic might, but also the brutal fury of the Emperor's finest weapons and armor. Unquestioning in their devotion to the Rahati, the Great Khan of the White Scars and Gorgon of the Iron Hands would remark that the Sekhmet were little more than automatons. The Hidden Ones would serve as the scout auxilia of the Legion. Masters of infiltration and espionage, operatives of the Hidden Ones would gather intelligence for their Legion whilst imprinting psychically reprogrammed sleeper cells within their enemies' ranks. Yet with the Thousand Suns fall to chaos, the organization of the Legion now falls squarely in the palm of the exalted sorcerers. The malevolent arcanists of the Thousand Suns that lord over their kin to no compassion or shame. Driven to accrue mastery and control of the Immaterium, the exalted sorcerers would become empowered by the deaths of their less fortunate kin. Commanding the hollowed husks of the Scarab Occult to serve their whims, the Lords of Dust and Ashes lead their phantom kin in campaigns across the stars. Dreadnoughts of the Legion now skulk the material realm as hellbrutes of the ruinous powers. Intensely hated by the 15th Legion, the hellbrutes of the Legion hunger for pain and suffering, emotions anathema to the vast battalions of rubric marines. Recruiting naive Chaos Space Marines into the fold of the 15th, such pilgrims shall be promised vast powers of the warp for their service. Bound to the malevolent soul of the hellbrutes, these souls are sacrificed to the abominable ancients of the 15th to sate their need for eternal agony to fuel their machines of war. Requiring surplus forces to meet the needs of their deployments, the Thousand Suns also employ demon engines such as Helldrakes, Defilers, Forge Fiends, and Mauler Fiends to bolster their ranks. Enslaving minor warp beings into their demon engines, the sorcerers of the 15th delight in their dominion over such terrifying creatures and fuel their ego by deploying them as cannon fodder. During the years of the Great Crusade, the Thousand Suns would incorporate 5 cults of the Arcana in order to facilitate the will of their Primarch. Formed by the original members of the Crimson King's inner circle, known as the Rahati, each of the 5 cults would master a discipline of the Great Ocean. Maintaining headquarters within the Grand Pyramids of Tizca, each vanguard of the cults would contain repositories of knowledge adorned with the golden icon of their order. All save for the Pyrrhate cult, whose pyramid would bear an endlessly burning flame, guarded by the warlord titan of the Legio Astorum, Canis Vertex. The Athenaean would specialize in telepathy and communications. Able to read the thoughts of others and communicate en masse across their legion, the Anatheian would prove crucial during the Legion's compliances of worlds. Understanding their opposition strategies as intimately as if written on a page of parchment, the Athenaean would undermine their enemies' deployments before they had even begun. The Corvidae would delve into the great ocean to gain precognition and portents of the future. Seeing all possible futures outlined before them, the Corvidae would advise their counterpart brethren in the optimal progress of campaigns and skirmishes outlined by their divinations. The most preeminent of all the cults of the Thousand Suns, their pedigree would nonetheless wane as the twisting nature of the warp diminished their foresight. The Pavoni would master the arts of psychokinesis, allowing them to manipulate the biological chemistry and physiology of both their kin and their enemies. Manipulating the physical characteristics of their visage and diminishing their physical need for hydration and other bodily ailments, the Pavoni would prove valuable in enhancing their legion's already superior health. Capable of generating lightning born from their innate bioelectrical nervous system, the impact of such energies would overwhelm the organs of their foes, causing their hearts to explode and raise the temperature of their blood to boiling point. Further aiding their legion's apothecaries as arcane healers, the Pavoni would accelerate the cellular growth of wounded battle brothers and allow for hastened redeployment of injured Astartes. The Pyrae harnessed pyrokinetic powers, enabling them to control warp-borne hellfire. Lethal when deployed among their legion, the Pyrae would also bear the capability of transforming their bodies to better unleash their torrents and projectiles of purging flame. Engulfing their enemies in fire, the Pyrae would also be proficient in manipulating and tampering with mechanical automata such as Titan Legios and the Legio Cybernetica. Known as technopathy, the Pyrae would undermine battle lines of war machines whilst laying a burning path for their battle brothers to thwart their enemies. Finally, the Raptora would practice the art of telekinesis by hurling objects and ripping enemies with their manipulation of matter. Capable of creating Kine shields to protect their battle brothers and tearing war machines and soldiers to pieces with their abilities, the Raptora would prove crucial during the Legion's defense of Prospero by collectively conjuring a Kine shield to protect their capital city of Tisca from orbital bombardment. Though outside of the 5 cults arcana, 2 more mysterious sects also existed within the Thousand Sons. The Amitara Occult Intercession Cabal, or Amitara Occult, would be shrouded in mystery. Acting in the name of the Order of the Blind, the Amitara would act as the masters of espionage and assassination. Their psychic might would be harnessed solely to mete out death to their enemies, firing long-range weaponry knowing the precise moment wherein their targets would inhabit the space of their shots, accelerating the flow of blood from their victims' wounds or enhancing the speed of their projectiles. The Amitara would hasten the demise of their targets and dub their technique as the Mind Killer. Also of note, the Kenetai Occult Blade Cabal would serve as guardians of the Prosperine cults. Sworn by both verbal and psychic oaths to defend the cults, the most venerated members of the Kenetai would form cabals known as Blades. Swordsmen of otherworldly mastery, these scions of swordcraft would be extensions of their weapons and wield psychocrystalline-infused force weapons inscribed with their wielder's secret name and deeds. Bearing armor forged by the blind master artificers of the Legion, the Blades would defend the cults with unified and deadly skill. In the wake of their fall to the clutches of chaos, the Thousand Sons would propagate their remaining sorcerous endeavors through the implementation of 9 greater cults within the Legion, each led by an exalted sorcerer or demon prince bearing the rank of Magister Templi. Their lieutenants shall carry out the will of each great cult in the name of their master. United in purpose, these bands of miscreant magisters enable the schemes of their patron god and corrupt the very fabric of real space with their deeds. The Cult of Change would unravel and harness the rejection of order and be tasked with bringing compliance to anarchic and rebellious civilizations. The Cult of Duplicity employ deceit as an unknowable and Machiavellian force. The Cult of Knowledge seek to claim all tomes of eldritch teachings across the stars and identify the weaknesses in their foes through harnessing their secrets. The Cult of Magic unleash their full might in sorcery with no restriction of its power. Obtaining arcane objects in the possession of their foes, the Cult of Magic seek the purest devastation by means of the warp. The Cult of Manipulation enthrall their enemies and sow both mortal and demonic spies into the ranks of their opposition. Wreaking havoc from within, the Cult of Manipulation orchestrate complex plots brought to fruition through means of assassination and demonic possession. The Cult of Mutation transform their bodies and space around themselves by embracing the cursed flesh change. Transmuting entire planets into demon worlds, the souls of these unfortunate civilizations are turned into grotesque abominations twisted by the manifestations of the warp. The Cult of Prophecy pursue the threads of fate whispered from the fabric of the Immaterium. Divining the destiny most befitting their ambitions, the Cult of Prophecy twist their destiny for their own selfish whims. The Cult of Scheming concoct intricate campaigns as a form of perverse worship. Reveling in their scheming, the cult orchestrate grand plans of tactical maneuvers and feints in order to achieve grand and complex conquests. The cult of time view the flow of the past, present and future as a resource to be harnessed. Engaging their enemies in both the past and present simultaneously, the cult of time sow the seeds of defeat into their foes' actions long before they even draw their weapons. As masters of Arcanum, despite their small number, each Astartes of the Thousand Sons is a powerful warrior in his own right. Unwilling to battle in close combat when able to cast their warp-spawn sorceries, the Thousand Sons fight with guile and deceit in order to gain advantage in battle. Instilled with an independent nature by the teachings of their Primarch, each sorcerer of the 15th Legion lead detachments of rubric automatons into battle. Prior to their fall during the Horus Heresy, the less psychically gifted members of the Legion would march into battle wielding ether fire cannons, toxin-infused asphyx shells, and conventional bolters. Now empowered by the manipulations of Tzeentch, the Thousand Sons employ a variety of disciplines in battle, including the Disciples of Chance, Sinistrum, Geomortis, Heretic, Ectomancy, Dark Hereticus, and Discipline of Tzeentch. Arming their rubric marines with fell weapons such as Inferno bolters, Soul Reaper cannons, Hellfire missile packs, and Warp flamers, the armies of the 15th Legion incinerate their foes with otherworldly, purging flame. Further bolstered with icons of the ruinous powers, such as the Icon of Flame, each Thrall band and greater cult bolsters their potent sorceries by employing 9 lieutenants among their ranks to gain the favor of their patron god through his favored number. Fractured with the failure of the War Master to destroy the Imperium, the Thousand Sons roam the galaxy as largely autonomous warbands. Thrall bands led by minor Chaos Sorcerers and lesser Chaos Champions of the Magister Templi hound the Imperium, such as the Blades of Magnus, Tizcan Host, Brothers of Retaliation, Warband of Sektoth, Prism of Fate, and Sectai Prosperin. Estranged Sons of Magnus also voyage as shards of the Legion's former glory. Bearing sigils of their past, the Brotherhood of Dust, Crimson Sons, Prodigal Sons, Silver Sons, Red Echo, Warpgeists, and Grand Order of Hermetic Blades seek penance for their past transgressions. The more notable of these remnants of the 15th gain glories befitting their superior strength, as warbands recognized by their Genefather. The Rahati War Sect comprise the assembled might of Magnus's chosen sons, inhabiting the planet of the Sorcerers. Supremely powerful, the Rahati War Sect are named after the once bodyguards of Magnus the Red. Commanded by their Primarch personally, the various demon princes of Tzeentch and veteran Astartes of the Legion carry out the will of Magnus as his most powerful and loyal subjects. The War Covens harness the primal element of battle into spells of prodigious potency. Remolding the very fabric of reality to their whims, the War Covens are a deadly threat to all life among the stars in their pursuit of forbidden, arcane secrets. The War Cabals are the shadow of the Legion's former glory. Conquering the civilizations once under their own protection, the weapons of the War Cabals sunder their former dependencies as an act of vengeful scorn. The Sekhmet Conclave amass great power, led by ancient warriors of the 15th, commanding the thralls of the once noble Scarab Occult Terminators. Imbuing the hulking bodyguards with warp energies and sorcerous wards, the overlords of the Sekhmet Conclave unleash the fury of their Terminators to bring their enemies to heel. The Sangor Warherd deploy mutated beastmen into battle under the control of their masters. Resurrecting the carrion spoils of battle, the necromantic sorcerers delight in reanimating the corpses of their fallen foes. Making trophies from the dead, the avaricious beastmen and their patrons tear their foes limb from limb in order to sate their hunger for trophies and trinkets. And last but by no means least of these warbands are Ahriman's exiles. Led by the first captain of the Thousand Sons, Arzek Ahriman, the banished Astartes under the command of Magnus's former equerry seek knowledge of the warp to earn their redemption. Rallying disparate and disgraced commanders of his legion, Ahriman calls upon the diminished brotherhood of his kin in order to destroy their enemies. Shrouded in bitter, vengeful zeal, the exiles of the 15th Legion shall not relent in their quest to master the powers of the warp and renew their patronage of their Genefather. Yet the tides of the warp are vast and unknowable, and many believe the toil of the exiles shall be mired in blood and ashes, forever damned to hunger for knowledge that can never be sated.
Show me a living soul that believes that he has choice in anything, and I will show you the universe's greatest fool. The Blades of Magnus are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Bound to the cult of manipulation with their submission to the Changer of Ways, these loyal sons of the Emperor toiled to sunder the bonds of fealty made between their Primarch, Magnus the Red, and his conniving benefactor from within before his compact could be made. Banishing several demons which had orchestrated their liege's bargain, eventually Magnus discovered their actions, punishing his wayward sons by reducing their forms to mere puppets, cleansing them of sentience until only husks remained. The first warband of Tzeentch to pledge fealty to the Cyclops at the conclusion of the burning of Prospero, their rubrici, known as the Ones Who Stood Resolute, once stood as guardians of Magnus's tower upon Prospero, and now guard his sanctum upon the planet of sorcerers, Sortiarius. Clad in golden ceramite trimmed with azure blue, their heraldry reverses the color scheme of Magnus's once personal honor guard, the Rahati, as such a design demonstrates their intent to save Magnus from himself. The symbol of their warband displaying the coal-black eye of the cult of manipulation upon a field of gold, their habit of applying such pigment to their left eyes when flesh still encompassed their ceramite gave unknowing portents to the future sigil they would adopt. Their stoic resolve to save their Primarch from damnation now given way to slavish obedience. Perhaps it is a small mercy that none among the Blades of Magnus have awareness to understand such a bitter irony.
If I have to burn half of the Eye of Terror and raise the planet of the sorcerers to find the means, I will break your rubric and let our legion die at last.
The Brotherhood of Dust were a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Founded by the captain of the Thousand Sons Ninth Fellowship, Amon, the equerry and mentor of Magnus the Red, aided the chief librarian of the Sundered Legion, Arzek Ahriman, in conducting the ritual to save their kin from damnation. Witnessing the majority of his legion succumb to the rubric's atomizing influence, Ahriman's sorceries to prevent the Flesh Change curse led to an even worse fate as automaton rubric marines stood where living men had once been. Exiled by their Primarch for their folly, while Ahriman stewed in his failure, Amon independently sought a means to bring his undead kin back to life, founding the Brotherhood of Dust as their millennia of searching bore little fruit. Hoping to end the suffering of his legion, Amon sought out Ahriman with his investigations concluded, knowing that he alone held the necessary insight to reverse the rubric. Sending emissaries to join his Brotherhood of Dust, those who accepted the invitation benefited from the knowledge of Amon, while those that refused were annihilated. One such emissary, Tolbek, finding upon Chief Librarian Ahriman hiding amongst the Voidcraft Blood Crescent of the Cornate Warband, the Harrowing. Slain by Ahriman as he attempted to invade his mind telepathically, Tolbek's attack resolved Ahriman to destroy Amon as his Brotherhood of Dust managed to entrap the Blood Crescent. Subduing Ahriman with his powerful hexes and wards of binding, Amon brought Ahriman aboard his flagship, the Sycorax, demanding the information he sought to reverse the rubric. Dueling Amon as he escaped his confinement, Ahriman forced the master of the warband to combust under the strain of the psychic energies coursing through his body and assume command of the Brotherhood of Dust. Clad in the colors of the pre-heresy heraldry of the Thousand Sons, red with silvered trim. Likewise, the warband retained the sigil of the 15th as exemplars of their former glory. Their legacy ended as Ahriman summoned magic flames which scoured the Brotherhood Astartes armor of their red lacquer and silver trim. Every sorcerer and rubrique pledged fealty to the exile as their armor transformed into sheens of sapphire and gold. Likely subsumed into the fold of the exile's warband, the Prodigal Sons. No trace of Ammon's deeds remains of these warriors, as continued warfare has diminished their numbers over the millennia. The Crimson Sons are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Aiding the casting of the rubric of Ahriman following their legion's defeat during the Horus Heresy, Magnus the Red would punish these allies of his chief librarian due to its effects, turning the majority of their kinsmen into mindless automatons. Clad in red ceramite trimmed with gold, their panoply mimics their legion of yore. The symbol of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Duplicity upon a field of crimson, honoring the legacy of the Cyclops of Prospero despite their ignominy felt by the Crimson King. Exiled from the planet of the sorcerers for their crimes, as an entity separate from the Thousand Sons Legion, this warband wreaks havoc in the name of their Primarch in efforts to one day be forgiven and reincorporated into the fold. The Crystal Harbingers are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. A thrall band in service to the Thousand Sons Legion, its sorcerers extract portents of future events through their study of the demon engines, known as the Silver Towers. Clad in indigo ceramite trimmed with bronze, each Astartes often wears white tabards and robes marked with black sigils atop their panoplies. The symbol of their warband, a white icon of the Cult of Prophecy, centered on a field of cobalt, belies their duty to gather whispers which bleed from the warp. Exploring the realms of chaos and sorcerers, in efforts to arm their Legion of Origin with prophecies of future war, their communion with demon entities further entrenches their devotion to the ruinous powers. The Hermetic Blades are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Originally known by the more ostentatious moniker of the Grand Order of Hermetic Blades, these exiles of the Thousand Sons Legion aided the disastrous Rubric of Ahriman, which sundered the vast majority of their kinsmen to eternal torment. Finding new purpose as the shepherds of the souls of fallen mortals to the embrace of the afterlife, their imitation of the psychopomp spirits to which they once pledged praise on Prospero perceive the flesh as a cage to which imprisoned souls languish. Clad in light blue ceramite, trimmed with gold, the symbol of their warband, an ebon sigil of the Cult of Mutation atop a field of blue, belies their worship of change via the manipulations of chaos. Devising cruel new methods of liberating mortal souls from their bodies, their expertise at close quarters combat allows them to capture subjects with which to continue their soul-flaying experiments within the safety of the planet of the sorcerers. The Oracles of Change are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once a loyalist chapter, known as the Lectors of Ixis, their downfall began as part of the judged chapters of the Adeptus Astartes following the ecclesiarchal purges of 321.M37. Warp Storm Dionys ravaging Imperial space, resulting in fourfold mutations and chaos uprisings overnight. As such civilians were purged, so too did Space Marines within its influence begin to show signs of corruption, both physically and psychologically. Saint Basilius, with sanction from the High Lords of Terra, demanded the Lectors of Ixis and their contemporaries to embark upon an act of penance within the heart of the Eye of Terror. The infamous Abyssal Crusade of the 37th millennium proved catastrophic. All 30 of such judged chapters set upon by Chaos fleets, and all but one broken into submission to serve the ruinous powers or be driven to extinction. So were the Lectors of Ixis turned against the Imperium, pledging fealty to the Architect of Fate. Re-emerging from the Oculus Terribus as the Oracles of Change, under the command of their Chaos Lord, Amadeus Volkstein. This former epistolary, once known as Vaneus, now wields the power of Tzeentch in opposition to the creed he once defended. Clad in dark red ceramite trimmed with gold, the symbol of their warband, a golden 8-pointed star set with the Eye of Tzeentch upon a field of dark red, emphasizes their fealty to the Changer of Ways. Last sighted during the Battle of Valoria Quintus, led by the Chaos Sorcerer Kartacha, their attempts to transform the planet into a demon world would be thwarted by the Silver Skulls Space Marine chapter. The death of Kartacha, at the hands of the Loyalists, a devastating blow to the warband. Nonetheless, no account for Amadeus Volkstein's whereabouts is of great concern, as the warband shall nonetheless return in time. The Prism of Fate are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Obsessed with the methods to which their sorceries can inflict death upon their foes, these Scions of Prospero once recruited members to their creed from every sorcerer's cult to better conquer the challenges posed by their Primarch. Clad in teal ceramite, trimmed with gold and adorned with white tabards, the symbol of their warband, a white reverse mark of Tzeentch on a field of teal, exemplifies their pledge to the Changer of Ways. Never killing their enemies in the same manner twice, these experimentalists prize imaginative solutions above brute force and cruelty as exemplars of the cult of change. The Prodigal Sons are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. The personal entourage of the exiled Chief Librarian, Arzek Ahriman. This cabal of sorcerers seek knowledge in the name of their patron god, hoping to glean insight to bolster their power. Assaulting the world of Apollonia in search of the writings of the personal remembrancer of Magnus the Red, Megavastu Callimachus, after 1,600 years of toil, the Prodigal Sons located the tomes within the Citadel Library, known as the Anapheum of Callimachus, during the 32nd millennium. Defended by a fanatical sect of warriors for over a month, the Prodigal Sons fought their way to the inner sanctum of the Citadel, eventually retrieving the writings of Callimachus and bringing the remainder of the library to ashes. Raiding the Harlequin Library upon the world of Arcadia during the 41st millennium, the unlikely alliance of both the Eldar and Bloodraven's chapter of Space Marines defended the Arcadium Librarium, which housed access charts to enter the Eldari webway. Procuring fragments of texts detailing means to venture through the webway, the Prodigal Sons, though unsuccessful in achieving their ultimate objective, nonetheless gleaned valuable insight which would aid their venture to the fabled Black Library. Clad in blue ceramite, trimmed with gold, their sigil of the Ouroboros of the Thousand Sons Legion emphasizes their loyalty to their former creed despite being exiled from their ranks. Last sighted during the Second War in the Webway of 999.M41, the intervention of the emissary of Iniad, Ivrain, the Daughter of Shades, awakened the Avatar Eldari God of the Dead to drive the Prodigal Sons from their domains, returning several of their automatons back to life before being destroyed. Though Ahriman now knew a means to restore his brethren to flesh and blood was achievable, many Prodigal Sons had perished for his hubris. The Sect of the Red Echo are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Led by their sorcerer lord, Dedofet the Red Echo, for millennia, this brawl band of the Thousand Sons have waged war surrounded by a cloying arrangement of harmonies of enigmatic origins. Some believing such phenomena to be a plain song from ancient Prospero, whilst others claim them to be the lingering screams of their victims. All that can be known for sure is that their sacrifices made to the Changer of Ways are never silent. Clad in azure ceramite, trimmed with gold and robes of crimson and cream, the symbol of their warband, a golden eye of the Cult of Knowledge, upon a field of azure blue, epitomizes their veneration of eldritch secrets. The cries of their offerings made to their patron god, heralding their arrival wherever they roam. Their analysis of the weakness of their enemies are bolstered by their fell secrets won in exchange for their rituals enacted. The Reflected Ones are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. a thrall band of the Thousand Suns, who view real space as an imperfect mirror of the immaterium. Such pawns of the Changer of Ways cast mutagenic spells to engulf entire planets. Clad in azure ceramite, trimmed with silver and yellow tabards, their symbol of the cult of magic upon a field of azure belies their quest to seek out arcane artifacts to use for their own fell deeds. Transforming entire populations into chaos spawn and sangor beasts, blood is spilled before such Astartes even set foot on their conquests, as the defenders try in vain to combat their enemy, both within and without their own ranks. The Scourged are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Formerly a loyal Space Marine chapter known as the Seekers of Truth, these close allies of the Ordo Hereticus of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition followed their honorable chapter master, Gallus Herodicus, into ruin. Fueled by their abhorrence of injustice, prompting Gallus to beseech the Master of Mankind for a means to divine those who seek to obfuscate their lies. Such a naive entreaty was manipulated by the Changer of Ways, blessing the Seekers of Truth the ability to perceive every and all lies which spilled from the mouths of humanity. The relentless barrages of falsehoods drove the chapter mad as they turned their guns upon the Imperium, now viewing the Emperor and his subjects as irredeemable perjurers. Chaos Lord Herodicus now leading his men to purge the Imperium, forever overwhelmed with the lies of others gnawing at his mind. This warband is forewarned of the greatest desires and ambitions of their foes, having delved deep into the deceptions to which they are nurtured. Clad in blue ceramite, adorned with burgundy pauldrons and golden trim, the symbol of their warband, the white all-seeing eye of Tzeentch with arrows protruding from its form, on a field of burgundy, emphasizes the many paths to which their patron's manipulations lead. Transcribing each and every deception made by humanity into their tome, the Book of Untruth. Every lie uttered, filling its pages, as their obsessive need for veracity blinds them to their own patron's duplicity. The Sectae Prosperine are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Drawn from the myriad minor sects of their Thousand Suns Legion of origin, their combined methodologies and arcane knowledge bolstered this thrall band's power. Now ascended from the fringes of the 15th Legion's hierarchy in influence, this amalgamation of warriors honor Prospero's ruling caste of yore in their regalia as they surpass the deeds of their independent kinsmen. Clad in azure ceramite trimmed with gold and gaudy finery, their tabards harken the glories of their former factions, such as the Learned Mystici, Brethren of the Amethyst Sun, and Bringers of Spiritual Dawn. The symbol of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Knowledge upon a field of azure, emphasizes their proclivity to acquire fell tomes, to rend the fabric of reality to their will. Considering themselves the true inheritors of Prospero's tattered legacy, their acceptance of its destruction spurs them to become unreserved devotees of the Changer of Ways. The Silver Suns are a Cinchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Covetous of precious materials mined from within unique celestial bodies, these harvesters of the elements use such alloys to aid their linking of past events to the future and other fell arts. Constructing demon engines with resources pilfered from their expeditions, all who stand in the path of the Silvered Suns during such ventures are purged. Pilfering the domains of the Necrons during their assault of the Nephrek dynasty, their Morlophines tore through their lines beyond the limits of their self-repairing abilities, their forms merging into abominations by virtue of their psychic presence. Clad in dark blue ceramite trimmed with silver and blue tabards, their belief in the power of the stars causes each member to set priceless metals into their construction, retrieved from broken solar bodies. The symbol of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Time on a field of blue, is a testament to their manipulation of fate in order to steer their efforts to victory. Last sighted during the Diaketh campaign of the 42nd millennium, fighting the defenders of the Tau Sep world, exalted sorcerer Amanek Solrend sundered laboratory complexes of the Earth caste in his wake, seeking to claim a scepter of iridium crystals. The Thralls of Magnus are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. The largest of all sects of the Cult of Scheming formed soon after the fall of the Thousand Sons Legion. These scions of the Crimson King have sundered the domains of the Imperium and Xenos alike by their plotting. Clad in azure ceramite, adorned with gold trim and tabards, the sigil of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Scheming upon a field of azure, typifies their praise given to the Lord of Change through acts of convolution. Their rivals often hoping to dethrone them from their immense power base, many are the impossibly intricate traps and plots set to snare their enemies. The Tizken Host is a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Deluded into believing that each and every sorcerer within their ranks died during the rubric of Ahriman, their rebirth as avenging angels could not be further from the truth. Quite possibly the most bloodthirsty thrall band of the 15th Legion, its members dutifully serve the whims of Magnus the Red in their attempts to bring the Imperium to ruin. Clad in azure ceramite trimmed with gold and tabards of white, green, and aquamarine, their Seraphia Rubricae scorch runes into their armor prior to their deployment. The symbol of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Magic, is styled into the so-called Horned Crown, which honors the Prosperine deity of legend, the King of all Angels. Leading their mortal choir of eagle pawns into battle, comprised largely of squawking Sangors. These parodies of the processions of the Great Crusade, to which they derive their name, are an affront to the ideals of the Emperor. The Warpgeists are a Tzeentchian warband of Chaos Space Marines. Founded by exiles of the Thousand Sons Legion, who collaborated with Chief Librarian Arzik Ahriman to fulfill his fell rubric, these warriors returned to the grace of their Primarch with the close of the 41st millennium. Part of the siege of the Fenris system during 999.M41, the exiled Magister Nezchad Aratos aided the ritual to bring the demon world of Sortiarius into the material realm, fleeing from the reprisal of the rout with their success in dragging the planet of the sorcerers from the Immaterium. Clad in azure ceramite trimmed with gold and yellow tabards, the symbol of their warband, a yellow sigil of the Cult of Duplicity upon a field of azure, belies their deceptive nature. Aratos sacrificing his own life in efforts to return his warband's men into physical forms. Only mere skeletons would inhabit his Rubricai's ranks as they continue to pillage the galaxy for spoils of Arcana anew. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The weaver of destinies offers hope and emancipation to those willing to swallow its deceptions. The plights of many so desperate that such falsities taste all the sweeter. Lies incur a cost, no matter their saccharine flavor, and shall always poison those who sup on them. White lies, though comforting, must be made only sparingly, for the more numerous the manipulation, the more insipid the poison. Truth often a bitter sensation, savored by few and appetizing to fewer. Do not grow accustomed to the palate of lies, for they shall become ever more enticing tangs to sate your hunger for deceit. And a diet of little truth shall sicken the body, mind and soul, until no antidote can save you from their toxins.